3, make your buttons bigger. That is such an easy thing to do. Doesn't cost you any money. I said I wasn't going to tell you about my 2 truths and a lie. I will tell you about one of them, as I do have frozen shoulder. So right now I can lift my arm sideways. Can you see it? Can you see me lift my arm sideways? No, you can't. Well, I'm at about, what, 35 degrees? Yeah, it's way better now, but for a while I could barely use my arm for a full day with my mouse. And so I had to use my non-dominant hand. So that's an example of what's considered a temporary disability. So especially when you say people with a disability couldn't do this job, there's nobody in my organization with a disability. Disabilities are full, they're partial, they're permanent, they're temporary, they're progressive. So I would have hated to have been fired because I have a 6-month stint of a bad shoulder and I have to use my non-dominant hand. And there are some software that I had to use where like I'm on track to hit the button I want, and then at the last minute, my hand shakes and I hit a different button because they were so small and so close together. And I would cancel out of something I didn't mean to cancel. And imagine if somebody's taking a test. They're taking your test. So, you know, I could do something with smaller buttons, or I can do something with larger buttons that anybody can click. There are a number of reasons why someone may not be precise with a mouse. And I'd hate to say you can't get better at your job because of it.
So, I have a question about that. What about the player? Because I don't think you can change the size of the buttons in the player.
So things like Storyline or Captivate players, they do meet best practices.
Okay. So
the, I forget the pixel count. There's no formal standard right now for a size. So I mentioned WCAG is the international standard, AA, and they are currently in version 2.1. They're about to release 2.2 like any day, but they've also been saying that for a year and a half. And in 2.2, there is a specific recommendation for how big the button will be. Now, one of the things, I'm primarily a Storyline person. One of the things I highly recommend in Storyline is the default next and back buttons are just the little arrow, just like little greater than, less than sign, and the submit button is just a check mark. That makes them very small, very hard to read. I always recommend going into the player settings and doing icon plus text. That right there makes the button bigger. And it also makes it clearer for people who might have information processing challenges. You know, you're on a question and all you see is a little check mark at the bottom. I don't think that's clear that that's a submit button. You have the word submit next to it. There's no question that that's your submit button. So that's one thing that'll make your buttons a little bit bigger. Yeah. I wish they had turned on the text by default, but they do not.
Diane, in the suggestion that you just made about the icon plus text, is that the same as changing the player sizing? Because like I just noticed that somebody helped me out with that and recommended to go up to 150 for the player, which helps to increase like the native next and forward. But do you still feel that that is insufficient?
So let me show it for those of you who aren't familiar with what we're talking. How many of you are Storyline users? So it looks like looks like a lot of you are. Here's the course I sometimes use for my 508 training. Let me pull that up and I will show you. So in the player dialog box, so the default is just these little arrows here. But if I go to colors and effects, I can say icon and text. Now I have the words, they're automatically bigger. And then you can also change the font on the player. So if I were to make this bigger, it does make everything a little bit bigger in relation to the slide. So that's something that you can change, both the percentage of the color and the player font. So let me try that again. I'm going to go down to 100, but not hit enter. You see how everything just got a little bit smaller. So you can control it to a certain extent. Yes, thank you. But I believe in adding the words also for the information processing benefits. I think everybody wins when it's clearer where to click. Okay, so number 3 is make your buttons bigger.